Hi everyone, welcome to another video on EDMCS. In this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about how we can automate the process of updating the metadata in a planning or an FCCS or even in an EPCM allocation application using data pipeline. So typically, data pipeline is obviously used to schedule multiple types of jobs. You can create and orchestrate jobs one after the other as we create a data pipeline. And I'm going to use a similar concept to actually update the dimensionality in a planning application. Now, there are a few very simple steps that we need to follow to actually create this pipeline. This is a relatively new feature when it comes to data pipeline. The EDMCS Export Job type is now available in the application, and we can actually go ahead and use it so that we can update the dimensionality directly from EDMCS. Before this, the way to do it was obviously you can manually trigger the export from EDMCS directly to planning and then have an import job run. You could have used EPM Automate as well in the past. So this is just another way of using data pipeline to automate and schedule this end to end. So the first step in the process is to actually create a connection to the EDMCS application from planning. So I'm going to show you how to do that, especially when we talk about creating that connection to the EDMCS application. Once you create the connection, then we can start the process of creating the pipeline. So in the second step, we just create a pipeline. In the third step, we start adding jobs to the pipeline. The first job that we would add is an EDMCS export job. Now, there is a prerequisite before you add the job. Obviously, the EDMCS application itself must have a planning type application registered, and that planning type application must have a connection which is created to this planning application environment. So essentially what we are saying is this planning application must be registered in EDMCS and connected to this planning environment. So the connection should be established both ways. The connection should be from EDMCS to planning and from planning to EDMCS as well. And I'm going to tell you in detail why this is required. So the connection from EDMCS to planning is required because when we actually trigger the export of the dimension to a file, and that file being transferred to planning will take place through this connection from EDMCS to planning. And we need a connection from planning to EDMCS as well, because the triggering of this export is actually being done from planning itself through the data pipeline. So in order for us to create this EDMCS export job in the data pipeline, this connection must be established. Once you have created this job, the export part from EDMCS is done. The next step is to actually add a metadata import job in the pipeline, and a prerequisite to that is the metadata for the dimension must be, the metadata job for that dimension must be updated in planning, or must be created in planning. So it's a two-step process. The first step is to actually create an export job, and the second step is to import the file that was exported in step 3 using the metadata import job in planning. Once this is done, you can run the pipeline and it would execute these two steps one after the other to update your dimension. Okay, so now let's talk about how to do this in the application. So as I said, the first step in the process is to create a connection to the EDMCS application from planning. So I will go into my planning application, go into Tools and Connections. Once I get here, I will click on the Create button at the top, choose Other Web Service Provider, and here I will actually create a connection to the EDMCS application. I will provide a name, a URL, an administrator, a service administrator credential. And the only important thing to note here is that we need to add a parameter called as service type, and the value of this should be EDMCS. So once you fill out the other details around URL and credentials, you can actually save and close your connection. Now you cannot validate your connection from here. There's no feature here to validate the connection. So you just need to save and close and hope it works. Once you do this, I have already created the connection to my EDMCS environment here. So I will not do that again. So once you do this, the first step in the process is completed. Now let's go ahead and start creating our pipeline. So I will now navigate to my application and I will go into and select the data exchange card. Once I get into data exchange, I can click on this plus icon and choose pipeline. I will give this a name as EDM export. I will also give it a code, and I will provide a different name because this already exists, and I will press on save and continue. I will leave all the parameters as is for now and save. So now I have created a pipeline that I can use to add my jobs. If I look at the third step, which is actually to add an EDMCS export job, it has a prerequisite that I talked about, and it means that the EDMCS must have a planning type application registered. So let's go and check out whether we have this prerequisite fulfilled. So I will go into my EDM application. So now I have navigated to my EDMCS application under the applications card. I can see that there is a corporate planning application that has been registered. And in this corporate planning application, I have my dimensions registered, and I also have a connection that has been created to my planning application. So this connection, just note the name of the connection, it's called production, and I have provided all the credentials and the URL for my environment. Once this is done, this is actually a prerequisite that needs to be present for us to create the pipeline. I'm going to switch back to my planning application now, and I'm going to start adding a stage. So I'll say this is export dimension from EDM. Just give it a name, just leave it as stage for now. Once I create the stage, I can start adding jobs. So let's start adding a new job to this stage. So now that I add a new job using this plus icon, I can go ahead and select my job type. So my job type is going to be export dimension by name, EDMCS. In my connection, I can choose my EDM connection, the one that I created in the first step. And once I do that, you will see that it now populates, this application was able to connect to the EDMCS application, and it now populates the list of all the applications that exist in my EDM environment. So if I switch over to my EDM environment, you will be able to see all the applications that exist here. The same list appears in this dropdown. I'm going to go ahead and select my corporate planning application that I just showed you as a prerequisite. Once I select that, I need to give the name of my dimension. I will provide this as entity, and make sure that you provide a name to the file that will be exported. So I'm going to give the name as entity.csv, and make sure that this is the same name that we import in the next step. And I will give the name of the EDMCS application connection. Now this actually refers to the name of the application connection that we provided in our corporate planning application here under connections. So we've given this name as production. We should specify the same name here in our pipeline. Now, basically what we are saying is when this job is executed, export the dimension entity from the corporate planning application in EDM using this connection. So what this job is going to do is it will run the export job in EDM and export the dimension entity. And how will it export it? It will basically export it to this connection that is created in the registered application. So it's basically going to transfer or export the dimension entity into a file which is called entity.csv, and then transfer this file through the connection called production into our planning environment. So in the background, basically it's going to create a file called entity.csv in our default folder in the planning application. This is what happens in the background as a result of this job. Now, once I create this job, I will go ahead and I will need to add another job, which is my fourth step. Now, this is to add a metadata import job in the planning application. The prerequisite is to actually create that job in planning. So I will just show you that part as well, the prerequisite. So if I navigate to overview, application overview under planning, go to dimensions and click on import, you can see that we can actually create multiple import jobs. I have already created one called as entity EDM import, but what we can I can actually show you how to do it very quickly. You can click on create. This is a simple way to do it. Click on create, select the dimension that you actually want to import. So I'm going to choose first of all, for my location, I'm going to choose inbox. For the entity dimension, I'm going to provide the name as entity.csv. Remember that this has to be the same name that you provided in the export job, because the file will be created with the same name. It is a comma delimited file. I will leave the rest as is and save this as a job. Once I do that, you will have to provide a name, and you can see that I have created this sort of a job here. So I can give it any name. For now, I will give this as so I'm going to give the name as entity.csv and make sure that this is the same name that we import in the next step. And I will give the name of the EDMCS application connection. Now this actually refers to the name of the application connection that we provided in our corporate planning application here under connections. So we've given this name as production. We should specify the same name here in our pipeline. Now, basically what we are saying is when this job is executed, export the dimension entity from the corporate planning application in EDM using this connection. So what this job is going to do is it will run the export job in EDM and export the dimension entity. And how will it export it? It will basically export it to this connection that is created in the registered application. So it's basically going to transfer or export the dimension entity into a file which is called entity.csv, and then transfer this file through the connection called production into our planning environment. So in the background, basically it's going to create a file called entity.csv in our default folder in the planning application. This is what happens in the background as a result of this job. Now, once I create this job, I will go ahead and I will need to add another job, which is my fourth step. Now, this is to add a metadata import job in the planning application. The prerequisite is to actually create that job in planning. So I will just show you that part as well, the prerequisite. So if I navigate to overview, application overview, under planning, go to dimensions and click on import. From this page, you can click on create. I will choose my location as inbox because the file that gets exported from EDM gets exported into the default inbox folder. Now this is not your typical data management inbox folder. This is the default folder that exists in planning. You have all your snapshots and logs stored in that folder. You can actually check it out through EPM Automate. I'm not going to get into the details of that. But here in your entity dimension, you need to provide the name of the file that it's going to use to actually import the data. So make sure that this name is the same name that you've provided in the data, in the metadata export job in your first step in the pipeline. So now I will save this as a job. I will give this a name and call it EDMCS entity export job. I will skip this for now and I will make sure my database refreshes after this. So my job has been saved. So my other prerequisite that was needed, which was a metadata job, must be created. That now exists in planning. So I can now close this and move back to the page where I have my data pipeline. So I'm just going to move to my data pipeline. So I'm going to go into my application, data exchange, and choose the pipeline that I created in the first step. Okay, so just taking a little bit of time to load. Let me just quickly refresh. Okay, we just go back and reopen my data exchange again. And there we go. So I'm going to choose my EDMCS export job that I created. So as you remember, my first step was done. I'm going to add a new job now. Once I add a new job, I will select the job type, and this job type is going to be import metadata. Now, as you can see, as soon as I selected, the connection will be local because this is going to be using the job from the planning application itself. And I'm going to select the job that I created, which was EDMCS Entity Export Job. Once I create that, I can again provide the import file name. Refresh cube can be yes, and I'll leave this as blank. So this is just going to override the parameters that I selected for the job. I can go ahead and now make sure that I've provided the right details in the first step as well. So yes, it's the same name. Okay, so now after this step, my pipeline is ready to be executed. So now we are on to the last step in the process to run the pipeline. Let's go ahead and start running our pipeline. I'm not going to provide any of these details. This can be left as default for now. So let's see. Now my pipeline job is submitted. We're just going to monitor the progress. So the first step completed successfully. As you can see, it shows a tick mark. This means the step was successful. The second step is in progress. It'll take a few minutes, depending upon the size of the metadata being exported. We can actually go into the job screen. So you can see that it exported EDMCS. The EDMCS export job is done, and then was already done, and then it also ran the EDMCS entity export job in planning. So I'm just going to go back again to my data exchange. And you can see that the pipeline has now successfully run. So now that we know that our pipeline is working, I'm going to show you an actual example of how it will update the metadata. So let's go into our home page. And I will go into my application overview just to give you a quick look into my entity dimension. So you can take a look at the entity dimension. There are a couple of demo entities that I've created. I will create another entity here in EDMCS and show you that after running the pipeline, this would be automatically created. So I'm just going to navigate into my EDMCS application. I'll go to my corporate planning application view in EDMCS. I'm going to navigate to my entity dimension, and what I'm going to do is to create a new request, and I'm going to give this entity a name. Let's give it a name as EDMCS Export Demo. So given this a name, let's make sure that we have all the parameters filled out. I think we do. We leave most of the parameters as is, just making sure that there are no more mandatory fields that we need to fill out. I think we're good. So I'm just gonna submit this change request that I created, and the change request was successfully submitted. So now you can see that the EDM export demo field has been EDM export demo node has been added. I will now navigate back to my planning application. So I have now navigated back to my planning application, and I will go and trigger my pipeline. This time I'm just going to do it from the jobs page. So I'll click on schedule jobs, and I can go ahead and select the integration pipeline. Obviously, I have the option of scheduling it daily or weekly as I see it fit. I will choose run now for the time being. Click on next. I will choose the EDMCS export job that I just created. Click on select. Leave all the parameters as is. Click on next, and I will just click on finish. Once we do that, you can see that it now runs the EDMCS export test pipeline, and it's going to start executing all the jobs. So within this EDMCS export test, so now you will see that if I go back to my data exchange, you will see that it has run both the jobs. That is complete. Just go back to my planning page, and I refresh, you can see that it's complete. If I go to my entity dimension now, you should be able to see the new node that I created. So you can see that the EDM export demo, the node that I created in my EDMCS application, is now available in planning. So overall, you can actually use your data pipeline feature to synchronize all of the dimensions. I just showed you one, but I can always add more jobs in my pipeline and synchronize all the dimensions uh, at various stages or within the same stage as I see fit in the pipeline. So overall, this new feature is pretty amazing in the sense that I can orchestrate my metadata updates through the data pipeline and make sure that every these jobs can be scheduled on a frequent basis, so my application is up to date uh, every time I have users coming into the application. So this was another video that I wanted to create just based on the new feature that was released for data pipeline. I will be talking about more features around EDMCS in depth in some of my upcoming videos. So stay tuned and let me know your comments and feedback on my video. Thank you.